Hello, everyone, and welcome to the number one liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. And it's kind of funny. I'm getting a little feeling of deja vu. It's almost like I've seen you guys in the last 24 hours. I wonder why. Oh, that's right. My 3-hour Independence Day special that the live stream went off without a hitch. I was actually kind of surprised. Well, not really. I mean, sort of. But anyway, I did receive notification that YouTube blocked it because of copyright issues with some of the music that I played. So if you want to see that Independence Day special in its entirety, head on over to rumble.com, and search up the Whiskey Musings Broadcast channel. And once you find it there, you'll find it. It's Independence Day 2023 3-hour special. And you can go and take a look at that, and also hop up and, maybe learn a little something about the Independence Day. And why we celebrate it, which is kind of interesting because I noticed on all of the social media outlets that all of the lefties were like, don't celebrate it because, it's the patriarchy, slavery, racist, any other name that they wanted to play. But anyway, that's interesting. The voiceover you said didn't play. That's weird. I'm going to have to go and check that out. Thanks for the shout out there, 3 Chevy. I will have to check that out. All right. So tonight I've got a bunch of things. Obviously, a lot of it is going to be about the Supreme Court, just because some things kind of came out. I mean, they sort of dropped the bombs on us on Friday. So, you kind of have to expect the news cycle to take a little while to catch up. And also, another thing happened over the Independence Day festivities at the White House. They found a little white powder in the White House. And, so anyway, so I've got something on that as well. Is a absolutely fabulous pet of the week. Given to us by Coco Deminky over on Rumble. So I have a pet of the week for this week, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, we'll round it all out with the Constitution Quarter, of course. So let's go ahead and get things started with what am I drinking tonight? I am drinking the Redneck Riviera whiskey. This is John Rich's whiskey. You don't know who John Rich is, you're not a country music fan. John Rich is the part of the dynamic duo Big and Rich. He is very conservative. And so, yeah, it's good. It's actually really good whiskey. It's a blended whiskey. It's not like a bourbon or scotch or anything. It's a blended whiskey. But it tastes, I personally like it. I think it tastes pretty good. Okay. And of course, tonight is, Whiskey Wednesday. Apparently the button isn't working that clearly, but anyway, Whiskey Wednesday. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. And so we also have tonight's sponsor, affiliate, whatever, in True Grit Roots Network. True Grit Roots Network champions independent artists while paying respect to the pioneers who shaped modern roots music, featuring outlaw country, blues, and rock with a unique twist of urban that is carefully selected and purposely put together. We are the radio highway that connects the back roads, highways, and city streets to your favorite dance hall, roadhouse, and juke joint. TGRN provides original, exclusive programming and interviews that are produced and hosted by our own team of DJs, hosts, and personalities. Find us on the web at tgrn.net to download our app in the App Store and from Google Play. Alternatively, you can find us in the Live 365 catalog of digital radio stations and through the Live 365 app as well. You can also play our station on your Amazon Alexa by saying, "Play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Be sure to use the word "from" in the command, "Play True Grit Roots Network from Live 365. Live 365 is also on Roku, so you can play it through your TV. Breaking boundaries. For authentic Roots Radio, True Grit Roots Network, TGRN.net, Austin, Texas. And of course, I need to announce, in the interest of complete and open honesty, that I am a part owner in True Grit Roots Network. It's a great little station. You ought to give it a try. We're doing some fabulous things over there, and we've got some other things coming up too that are going to be potentially changing. But anyway, all right. So first off, there was a lot of conversation this week with regards to, and I forgot to show, I am drinking out of my We the People LuckyShotUSA.com rocks glass, and I have rocks, whiskey rocks, in it. A couple fingers. Yeah. Okay, maybe 1.5. But anyway, all right. Like I said, it's really, really good. Okay. So first of all, Friday, the Supreme Court dropped a whole bunch of things onto us with regards to stuff like, the affirmative action. And hey, web designer who has Christian values can't be forced to use or can't be forced to say things that she does not believe in. We also, like I said too, I covered it on last Saturday as well. We also had a Christian, evangelical Christian postal worker that got held up for not working on Sundays and things like that. The biggest one, of course, the two biggest ones were obviously the affirmative action, and the other one being the web designer case. Now, here's the thing. First of all, there were a couple things that have come out in the news. The left-wing news, the mainstream media, has been saying that are pretty much, they're a couple of lies, okay? They don't tell you everything about it, and I thought it really important to bring it up. But this piece from the Washington Examiner actually does a better job of it than I do, necessarily. So here we go. The Supreme Court rejects the liberal arguments based on lies. So not only did the courts side with people, but they also saw through the liberal left, or I particularly did just cut them back to leftists, with regards to their arguments. And one of the first argument, let me see. So the first argument that was overturned, obviously, was the affirmative action case. And the affirmative action case in particular was the Students for Fair Admissions versus the University of North Carolina. And the first one, of course, was turned over for a couple of different reasons. And I've actually been kind of tossing them around on social media, but the biggest one, obviously, is the fact that affirmative action actually, to sum it all up, is considered reverse racism, and that using race as a basis of trying to weed out certain people was initially decided on by the court to have a short period of time. It wasn't, and roughly the last time the court ruled on this was that they said roughly 25 years. Well, it's been 25 years since that particular court case got decided. And so now this case came up. And so the justices pretty much said, well, in accordance with this other case, we think it's about time that we remove this because it was only supposed to be a temporary fix. It was only supposed to be very narrow. It was only supposed to be used in the positive and not in the negative. And unfortunately, both Harvard and UNC clearly, according to the case notes, violated the 14th Amendment in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay. Now, the left has just gone absolutely nuts and bonkers over this thing. They hate it. And the reason being is because they can no longer use the soft bigotry of low expectations in order to manipulate college admissions. Now, what they don't tell you, of course, is that statistically speaking, a lot of people who are admitted, I won't say about the numbers, but a lot of people who are admitted under race-based admission programs, realistically, who don't measure up to the specific metrics like test scores, high grades, things like that, they tend to drop out after a time. And so even though they get them to come in admissions-wise, what they don't show you is what happens when it comes to graduation rates by these people who were admitted under some of these policies. And not saying that that was any part of this case. It actually wasn't. But the thing is that the whole situation here with regards to the college admissions is that, again, it was supposed to be very narrow in use and scope. It was supposed to be only a certain amount of time. And the court understood that it was an attempt to try and equal the playing field, let's say, for college admissions. Now, unfortunately, because of the time constraint and because of the fact that both the University of North Carolina and Harvard could not prove that they weren't using race as a negative, that's why the court said, you know what, it's about time that we go ahead and strike this down. Obviously, as you know, per usual, I guess you could say, the three liberal justices or leftist judges who actually are more activist than they are constitutional jurists, they went ahead and sided with the fact that this was wrong to take it down. And if you read their opinions, especially Ketanji Brown Jackson's opinion, which is extremely long, I won't say rambling because I haven't actually read it 100% yet, but I will say that if you read it, you get the undertones of it being more of an argumentative paper that you would submit in college versus an actual legal opinion. And of course, you know, I call that out every single time on social media, and I get hit occasionally with that, you know, from the left saying, oh, no, it's the conservative court that's more accurate. Well, the thing is that our country was not founded upon the idea that slavery was going to last forever, that racial inequalities were going to last forever, or anything else. And so, yeah, we just ended up, they ended up taking it down. Okay, so that's the first one. And the lie, of course, that was being told was the fact that the universities were not using race in a negative fashion, and they got called on it. The second one had to deal with 303 Creative versus Ellenis. And one of the things that came out about this case that the left has just completely glommed onto is the fact that the scenario that was presented to the court was a hypothetical. Okay, now the left, of course, has turned it into it's a fake case. And because it's a fake case, it should get thrown out, meaning that the 303 Creative folks essentially made it up. And so because they made it up, they never should have gained standing. Well, here's part of the problem. Here's part of the problem with this. There is such a thing known as a pre-enforcement claim, which essentially means that if a law does get passed, okay, and let's say in this particular case, we're dealing with the Colorado law, and it could potentially trample on somebody's constitutional rights. At times, you can petition the court and be granted, and this is the key, is it doesn't happen very often, but you can be granted a hearing based on the idea that if you were to go and do something and this law were to be enforced against you, that it would break out somebody's constitutional rights. It would trample on somebody's constitutional rights. And so what ended up happening is, in this particular case, yes, the case itself, or the scenario that was brought, was a hypothetical. But the fact of the matter is that it was brought under the idea that it was a pre-enforcement claim, and the reason why it was granted was actually written in the opinion, which pretty much stated, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but pretty much stated that 303 Creative was going to expand its business into wedding website design. They were already a business. Okay. The left is like, oh, she's not even a business. Well, no, I'm sorry. She already was a business, and she was looking to expand her offering into the wedding sphere. And what she wanted to do was make absolutely certain that if she did do that, that if she refused to make a same-sex wedding website, that she would not get hit by this Colorado law. Now, the justices granted her pre-enforcement claim because of the fact that the Masterpiece Cakes Baker law or case had already come before the court. And so they pretty much, the Supreme Court pretty much said, hey, look, we need to rein this in and nip it in the bud because Colorado has already overstepped its constitutional authority and will likely do it again. Now, as a part of the case, too, both sides, both the Colorado State and the 303 creator, they both showed up in court and they stipulated their facts. They both stipulated the facts that she wanted to do a website. She wasn't blocking anybody else. And this is the other part that the left has been lying about, is the fact that she can discriminate completely off of her religion. And that's not what she said. She said she was willing to make websites for anything else other than same-sex marriage. And so the same argument that the Masterpiece Cake guy did, okay, which was, you can buy any cakes in my shop and I'll be more than happy to bake cakes for you, but I'm not going to put any kind of custom messages that go against my religious beliefs on the case or on the cake. And so because these two were so similar, they basically got, decided in pretty much the exact same way. Now, the thing is that is so frustrating to the left is the fact that they believe that the court should force what they want down on everybody else. And the thing about it is that there's always been a principle. I don't know where the left gets this idea that everybody always gets whatever they want, but there's always been a principle within the Constitution that essentially is that my rights don't end where you feel your rights should be. That you can't force me to do things like say things that I don't want to say, or do things that I don't want to do, or believe in things that I don't want to believe in. That's a fundamental freedom and liberty action by us in the United States. And that's pretty much, pretty much been very common. And so what happened with this is that the Masterpiece Cake baking and now this 303 is pretty much, I would think that the Colorado legislature should relook at this law and rewrite it, reinterpret it, or something like that, and put it all together to essentially try and avoid this kind of stuff in the future. And then, of course, we had the unauthorized diversion of the money. That one was, nothing unusual. I mean, pretty much we all knew he didn't have the authority to do that, but he is going to try and do it again. He's going to try and do it under different circumstances, something. I don't know. He's going to look, Biden's already announced that he is going to go on with it. He is going to try and figure it out, which, of course, leads me to the next article about this. And that is that, first of all, the majority of voters agree with the Supreme Court's ban on affirmative action, according to polls out there, which, let's be honest, it just makes sense. But apparently the ABC News Ipsos poll taken after this found that 52% of voters support the 6-3 ruling, with only 32% disagreeing. So that's like 84%. So that leaves what, about 15% or so, 16% or so that are undecided on it. And apparently the results of this split along racial lines too. 60% of whites and 58% of Asian Americans supported the decision, while Hispanics were split 40-40. And of course, Black Americans were the only group to have the majority disapprove at 52. Well, again, that's kind of the thing. Obviously it was put in the news media as this was a detriment to Black Americans, which it's not. All it does is it just takes race out of the equation and allows you to use more, what do I call that? Intrinsic measurements, I guess, is the best way to say it, but basically using more equal measurements across the board for it. But if you were on the Twitter sphere or anything else, this poll would be, everybody would be like, oh no, there's no way. That's just horrible. Okay. So apparently the Supreme Court is not potentially done with Joe Biden, which I'm not really surprised, but the next grouping that's coming up. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the wrong article. Hold on. So, in terms of the affirmative action part, let me reset. In terms of the affirmative action part, one of the things that the Federal Commission and some of these other experts that are out here are essentially coming out and they're saying that this affirmative action case could also put corporations' DEI policies and procedures into the crosshairs as well. And this one I actually kind of agree with. I mean, if you're going to do away with it in public institutions, why can't you get away, or why can't you get it out of maybe not necessarily private organizations per se, but other businesses and things like that. But a top federal commissioner, so this is coming from the Epoch Times, a top federal commissioner predicted that companies and corporations will see an increasing number of lawsuits over controversial left-wing diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, as well as the equally controversial environmental, social, and corporate governance measures. So both DEI and ESG are going. So the Employment Opportunity Commission Commissioner Andrea Lucas told Fox News last week, "I think this is going to be a wake-up call for employers. Today is the best time for lawyers to really take a really hard look at the lawfulness of their corporate diversity programs." Lucas apparently told Fox last week that a number of businesses don't use the word affirmative action. It's rampant today, from ESG to focuses on equity pretty much everywhere. There's a ton of pressure at the corporate 100 across corporate America to take race-conscious decision-making, race-conscious actions in employment law, and that's been illegal, and it's still illegal. And that's true, which is essentially what the court pretty much said, is that. So this obviously is going to create some more problems for the left and the Biden administration. And this is part of the reason why they are literally freaking out about this thing. They are just absolutely nuts over the affirmative action program. Well, the thing about it is that, and I've hit a bunch of people up in terms of the Constitution part and that kind of thing. This is a constitutional decision. And it was done properly to the Constitution and the Civil Rights Act. Okay. So, but the question comes into mind for most of us, especially most of us conservatives. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. This just caught my eye over here on Rumble. 3 Chevy says, whenever I hear DEI, I think of Dale Earnhardt Inc. You've had too much in the NASCAR world. Okay. 3 Chevy. Oh my gosh. He is such a crack up. Anyway, moving on back to what I was saying. So the Supreme Court is not necessarily done with the Biden administration. Okay. So apparently they have already set up their docket for when they come back in October. They're currently going on recess, which is basically how that works. You know, they hear the cases, they, debate, discuss within themselves, so on and so forth after they've heard the cases. And then of course they come out with the opinions. And it's the end of the opinions that it's the end of the session when all of the opinions come out. And that pretty much is what happened, what has happened here in July. So or in June. So they will take August and September off and then re-adjourn back in October, I believe it is. And before I continue really quick, Daybreak 3 over on Rumble, thank you so much for the Rumble rant. I do appreciate it. That is just absolutely fabulous. I do appreciate that. And what she said is, cheers to Whiskey and Cheryl. And that has to deal with yesterday's button freedom raffle, which was going on during my 3-hour special. Which I understand that Outlaw Dogs is sending out the buttons here. She's been able to get a hold of everybody and get all of their addresses and everything else. So hopefully you guys will be getting your buttons, your Whiskey Musings Broadcast buttons, soon in your mailbox. All right, so back to the 5 Supreme Court cases that are going to be crucial, things that you need to watch when they come back from vacation. This comes from the Washington Examiner. And there's 5 cases. I personally think there's 2 in particular that you really should pay attention to. And basically the first one is, do domestic violence offenders have a right to own guns? Apparently, there was a Biden administration appeal in the defense of a federal law that blocks people subject to domestic violence restraining orders from possessing a firearm. A Texas-based man, Zaki Rahimi, I think it's Rahimi. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced, but is appealing his conviction of violating that federal law, arguing the Supreme Court landmark decision in the New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin last summer means the federal law also violates the Second Amendment. Rahimi was involved in 5 shootings around the Arlington area from late 2020 to early 2021. Police identified him as a suspect, used a search warrant to search his home, and found a rifle and a pistol. They also found a copy of a restraining order issued against him in 2020 after a physical altercation with his girlfriend at the time. The case itself is known as U.S. versus Rahimi, or Rahimi. Anyway, the next one is a trademark dispute. This one I'm not all that interested in this, but this is, anyway. It is a trademark dispute over a Trump's small hands joke. The Supreme Court agreed to consider if a California attorney has the First Amendment right to trademark the phrase Trump too small for use on T-shirts mocking the former president. So this is going to be interesting in terms of the trademark part of it. So, but I mean, again, I don't really see this as something major that's going to affect the rest of the country per se. It's just more of a leftist kind of a shot at Trump. But you might want to watch it just for fun. But anyway, according to the Biden administration, asked the justices to uphold the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's rejection of attorney Steve Elster's application because federal law doesn't allow trademarks to use a person's name without first receiving consent. I'm going to guess if he didn't receive consent, that's probably going to be taken down, I would guess. But then again, I don't know, because Trump's name, now that he's been president, it puts it into a public eye. So, that's going to be kind of interesting to see. Only just out of my own curiosity for it. Let's see. Another case. This one is definitely one to watch, in my opinion. Can Biden tax the rich? Now, here's the thing. Biden can tax income. That's based off of the 16th Amendment. I'm sorry, not Biden, but the Congress can tax income based off of the 16th Amendment. What is at issue here with this taxing the rich is taxing what is considered unrealized income from capital gains. Apparently, and this is part of Biden's wealth tax thing. So apparently, justices will consider a tax case that put the fate of the Biden administration's wealth tax and other future tax proposals in jeopardy. The case challenges the mandatory repatriation tax, repatriation. There it is. Mandatory repatriation tax as a violation of the 16th Amendment. If found unconstitutional, it could pump the brakes on President Joe Biden's tax proposal aimed at taxing the U.S.'s ultra wealthy. Okay, so the case itself, according to the piece here, centers on Charles and Kathleen Moore, who made an almost $40,000 investment into an Indian corporation in 2005. They did not receive any money or other payments from the company, despite the corporation making profits every year. The Moores lost before a federal judge and in front of an appeals court over this. So basically what this is they didn't realize any gains, and they apparently have hung on to the stock. So they didn't receive any disbursements. They didn't take any money out. And so this is a serious case, because if Biden can, or if the court stands up and says that Congress can actually tax whatever the heck they want, which, I mean, I'll be honest with you, constitutionally, that's sort of what the Constitution says. But in terms of if they can tax whatever they want, the ability to tax something that is unrealized gains, meaning that you haven't even made the money, and that's part of what Biden's wealth tax is going on with, is the idea that you can tax something that doesn't even exist, which I think is really, really weird. It's sort of like taxing, I mean, and I guess in a way it'd be sort of like taxing the equity that you have in your home, for an example. So you would go through and let's say that your home, you bought it for $200,000, and so all of a sudden the housing market went really, really well for you, and you ended up where you could sell it for, say, $1 million. Well, the $800,000 that you could potentially realize if you were to sell it, but you haven't yet, but if you wanted to sell it, would be taxed. I think that's a little difficult to kind of swallow. And so I'm not exactly sure this is something that is going to come down to constitutionality. I think it's going to be more of the courts are going to look at it and go, how can you tax something that isn't even realized, in somebody's pocket? I mean, it's basically taxing what you think you're worth, not what you actually are worth once you sell, the stock or the asset, whatever the asset is that is being quote unquote taxed. So, so this is going to be interesting. This one is definitely going to be an interesting one. And another one here is that's out there is, will fishermen curb agency power? This particular one comes from 4 New Jersey fishing companies that asked the justices to overturn the 1984 Chevron versus National Resource Defense Council ruling, which essentially instructed courts to defer to administrative agencies when they provide a reasonable interpretation of a vague statute. Now, this one's going to be interesting only from the standpoint of it will potentially take away the idea that an unelected bureaucrat agency would have higher authority than the law and then Congress. I could see this going either way, honestly. But it is definitely something interesting in the fact of it. And again, if you look at the Constitution, Congress is the only one that can legislate. And so if that's the case, then what Congress needs to do is clarify the law and rewrite the law so that it's no longer vague. But again, this one's going to be another one sort of to kind of keep an eye on. I'm not exactly sure how big it's going to get, but it certainly will take a look. And then this last one here, talking about racial gerrymandering. Once again, we're talking about gerrymandering of districts, congressional districts. There was that case that already got lost in the that was part of the last week's decisions. And so, yeah, this one I don't think is really going to come out all that positive for us, because the court, especially with John Roberts, has already basically said, hey, we want the court to keep power. We want to keep power, even though it's constitutionally supposed to be the weakest of the three branches of power. But again, we'll just have to kind of see. So these are some of the things that the Supreme Court have got on their docket coming up in the next session, which again starts in October, I believe. So anyway, the biggest one obviously is the wealth tax. And so this is going to be interesting as far as that one. I think is going to be the big key that everybody's going to be focused on and that kind of thing, for it. All right. Not in the constitutional section, not at the Supreme Court level, but another thing came out, another decision came out, which it's really, 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 really important, especially for those of us who have completely believed that the government has been doing an end run around the First Amendment and free speech in this country, that the Twitter files showed they did. Apparently, and this coming from the Epoch Times, and also I have a New York Post article on it too. But the Epoch Times says, the judge, there was a federal judge that actually issued a block on the Biden admin from communicating with social media companies. And it's basically a federal judge has made a historic ruling. This is from the piece, partially granting an injunction that blocks various Biden administration officials and government agencies, such as the Justice Department and the FBI, from working with big tech firms to censor posts on social media. The injunction came in response to a censorship by proxy lawsuit brought by the attorneys general in Louisiana and Missouri. And you remember, I talked a little bit about this case before when it was talking about it. The case itself really focused on the COVID stuff, but there's other things that have come out during the case. And so now the federal judge in this case has basically said, yep, we're going to issue an injunction. You can no longer talk to them. So he wrote, honestly, in a July 4th ruling, talk about Independence Day. Holy crap. That's cool. So I haven't read the ruling yet, but according to the piece here, various government agencies, including the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. State Department, the Department of Justice, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, are prohibited from taking a range of actions regarding social media companies. He called it shocking, appalling, and concerning. So specifically, the agencies and their staff members are prohibited from meeting or contacting by phone, email, or text message, or, quote, engaging in any communication of any kind with the social media companies, urging, encouraging, pressuring, or inducing any manner for removal, deletion, suppression, or reduction of content containing protected free speech. Let's see. So Louisiana's Attorney General Jeff Landry, who was one of the plaintiffs, told the Epoch Times this could be arguably one of the most important First Amendment cases in modern history. In an interview following the ruling, if you look at the opinion that the judge lays out, he takes from our argument that this is basically one of the most massive undertakings of the federal government to limit American speech in the history of our country. The things that we uncovered in this case should be both shocking, appalling, and concerning for all Americans. The judge, Doty, wrote in the decision that the Republican attorneys general who sued the Biden administration, quote, have produced evidence of a massive effort by defendants from the White House to federal agencies to suppress speech based on its content. And while the judge's ruling isn't final, a preliminary injunction is a victory for the Republican attorneys general who have accused the Biden administration of pressuring big tech companies to engage in a censorship by proxy scheme. Landry said further that I think that this injunction today certainly begins curtailing government action and telling social media companies that what they can and cannot allow on their platforms, which is pretty much what happened. I mean, for those of you that don't understand, is that essentially what they were doing is they were contacting Twitter and pointing Twitter to certain accounts that were saying things that they didn't like. And so conservatives mostly were being, and you know, medical practitioners in particular with the whole COVID thing, calling out COVID misinformation and stuff like that from the government. And so, yeah, it's been a huge deal, but I see this as a positive. This is a positive and a movement that is great for this. So the judge wrote in an accompanying memorandum that the plaintiffs are likely to succeed on the merits in establishing that the government has used its power to silence the opposition. Now, keep in mind, if Twitter and Facebook and, you know, any of these other places had done this completely on their own, it's a different story, because those are private companies, private entities. Even though it's in the public square, it would have become more of a murky question as to whether or not the First Amendment was violated with this. But because of the fact that the government has been caught with messages that congressmen and, bureaucratic agencies and representatives of the government were actively participating in sending, information about accounts, this is where it really becomes a clear violation of the First Amendment, which is that the rights of free speech, which also was part of the 303 Creator case, as well as the Masterpiece Baker case, that the right to free speech is for everybody, and that you cannot limit what is free speech. Now, what's going to be interesting is to argue and see what happens with things like the Section 230 and that kind of stuff that might be impacted by something like this. But realistically, this is a clear violation of the federal government attempting to do an end run around the Constitution by using non-governmental organizations to do their dirty work for them. And this is a clear case. I honestly do not see this case not being ruled that the government overstepped its bounds here, realistically. There's more in the Epoch Times piece with regards to all kinds of stuff that they did. And so, I would suggest taking a look at that. I'd also suggest taking a look at the chilling revelations on the rise of Fed's Orwellian speech police, which essentially talks about that case. But also there's a new report. This particular one also makes mention of a new report from the House Weaponization Subcommittee on the little-known Homeland Security sub-agency called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It was talking about a rapid response team that was to local jurisdictions to help election officials fend off what they called mis, dis, and malinformation. I mean, basically, this is like the Ministry of Truth, but doing it in a quiet fashion. So, I mean, there is a clear push for all of this to happen. So this is going to be interesting to watch. These things are going to be interesting to watch because I'm sure that they will eventually end up in front of the Supreme Court. I just don't think that the government is going to back down from this position, because usually when you give government a power, it never gives it back. So that's kind of the big one. And this will be one to watch in the next coming probably year. I mean, by the time it gets through the federal court system and then an appellate court system and then up to the Supreme Court, I wouldn't be surprised to see this show up in front of the Supreme Court, probably within the next 12 years. All right. So let me move on to, where am I at here? To tonight's Pet of the Week.
Please check your mailbox. A new message has arrived.
All right, and tonight's Pet of the Week comes from Coco Dominky over on Rumble. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so give me just a second. I got to get this set up here. All right, so this is Bella. Okay, and there's a bunch of pictures here. So yeah. So we'll go through this whole thing. So Bella's got a bit of a story here, and here's what Coco sent me. Hey there, Whiskey. I'd like to introduce you to my beautiful black cat, Bella. Bella was born in a barn in Chugwater, Wyoming. Oh my gosh, I bet that's out in the middle of nowhere. And when her mama died, my friend's mom took care of her and weaned her. On October 29th, 2011, the same day I found out I was pregnant with my youngest son, my friend brought Bella to me. Bella has been the calmest cat I've ever owned. She never cared for when my son would pull her tail or pick her up and carry her around the house. She hardly ever gets upset about anything. She just lives with it and accepts it. Well, that's kind of cool. Cool cat. Bella is also quite the mouser. And let's see, I lost my place. She loves to go outside and catch rodents, but she also brings me birds and bunnies on occasion. Now, side note, I have a cat named Badger. You've seen him. You've probably seen his tail walk behind me. He is a outdoor cat and a barn cat. His favorite food is tender Hassenpfeffer. And so occasionally we will see him get the wild bunnies that are out here as well. He loves the little bunnies. He'll hunt those down. He would rather do those than like rats and mice, although he'll get rats and mice, but anyway. So, where was I at? Oh, I don't appreciate that, but she thinks she is bringing me gifts. Well, they all do. That's what they do. Bella loves to lay on my chest at night and purr. I find this to be so comforting. It's so relaxing to feel the purr vibration. So here are the pictures that have been included. This particular one that you're seeing right now is the first day when they got Bella. She took to us right away, and she was the perfect Halloween gift, of course. Black cat. Seriously? This photo, let me kind of blow it up here. This photo is Bella loves to play with feet, especially my eldest son's feet. I have no idea why, but my son, who is autistic, thinks that it's so funny when she attacks his feet. I've actually seen that on other cats too. I don't think it's necessarily like, specific to one cat or another. I know that like cats can get really, really interested when you're laying in bed and you move your feet down at the bottom of the covers. They'll go and they'll attack. Obviously they like the movement, and so they'll go and attack that. So that's cool. If your son likes it when she attacks his feet, you guys should try and set him up in bed, and see if he can kind of move the covers and get her to attack that. Okay, so number 3 here is Bella loves to sit on the side of the tub or even get inside the tub to drink excess water after someone takes a shower. Yep, that's common too. I've had cats all my life, and yep, they do that quite often. In fact, I occasionally have had one that has jumped in the shower with me when I'm showering, but doesn't like getting hit with the water, just likes to sit and watch the water go down the tub. I've had that happen before. Okay, so next picture here is the dogs and the cat get along great. Dizzy and Bella constantly give each other baths. This is the cat bed, but the dogs always take it over. I guess they like to cuddle close. Side note on that one, actually, Badger has taken over my dog Angus's bed at night sometimes, and Angus will not, under any circumstances, go in to try and move him out whatsoever. He just lets him kind of do his thing, and then when it's vacated, then he'll go and he'll try it and lay out. But yeah, so there's that. Okay. And this is, okay. So that one I couldn't do, which is actually fine because it was a boy and his cat. So I wasn't sure. I hadn't previewed this. So I wasn't too sure. That actually worked pretty well. Oh, wait a minute. Something is going on with the photos. Maybe they didn't come all the way through. Oh, this one did. Okay. And so this one is, my son likes to take pics of the pets with Snapchat. Now, I don't have Snapchat. I understand what Snapchat is, but I don't have it. But I know that's like one of the filters for it. And then let's see if the next one comes in. So this is a side profile of, and Coco says she loves side profiles of black cats. They make the perfect silhouette. I don't know if you've ever seen this photo that's out there, but there was a photo of a black cat and a kind of brown cat, and they were sitting kind of in perfect alignment with the angle of the sun. So it looked like the black cat was the shadow of the brown cat that was sitting in front. So that was kind of interesting. But anyway, I'll someday I'll try and dig that one up. Okay. So, apparently, my whiskey warriors that are out there, they tend to find they tend to find interesting things to send me with regards to whiskey. And so these next 2 photos apparently are directly at me. So they're not the cat, but they're directly at me. So, oh, no, this is the close-up. Sorry, I forgot this one. This is the close-up. She is so pretty when she does the head tilt to look at me. So yeah, so this is a close-up of Bella. So this is the picture. Oh, and of course it didn't come through. Son of a gun. So apparently there's a sign at Whiskey Gulch. Neither one of those 2 came through. I should have checked that before I went, before I did anything. But Whiskey Gulch is apparently a place to camp at Glendo State Park in Wyoming. And yeah, I do get a kick out of the name. Thank you for that. And apparently they were watching their Independence Day firework display from the pontoon, from her brother's pontoon on the lake. Too bad. I'm going to have to try and go back and grab those, see if I can find them. So, but that's okay. It's okay. It's no problem. It probably just got stuck in the email, or I didn't notice it downloading it. But anyway, so thank you, Coco, for sharing Bella with us. That is fantastic. I do appreciate that. Do me a favor, if you would like to get your pet featured on my Wednesday Pet of the Week, you can do so.
Please check your mailbox.
Sorry about that.
A new message has arrived.
It's because I didn't shut that off. Sometimes it goes, forget to shut it off when I switch scenes. Anyway, so yeah, if you do want to get your pet featured for Pet of the Week on Wednesday night, do me a favor, send me an email with the pet's picture and name, pertinent information to fans, FANS, at whiskeymusings.com. That's fans at whiskeymusings.com. And Sorry, what am I saying? .com. My gosh, I just threw myself off. It's .online. Fans at whiskeymusings.online. Apparently the whiskey's hitting me a little well tonight. It's fans at whiskeymusings.online. And you can send me your pet of the week. Also, I need some questions for whiskey if you've got them out there for Saturday night's segment. And that also can go to fans at whiskeymusings.online. All right. So again, thank you for sharing her with us, Coco. Do appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Outlaw Dogs. Outlaw Dogs is trying to keep me in line here. She goes .online. I said .com just because that's like, but this is it. It's fans at whiskeymusings.online. Thank you for correcting that. Okay. So, I don't know if anybody heard, but apparently Joe Biden is losing popularity in the polls. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but there was a new poll out that came out just before the holiday. But he is apparently the least popular president in the last 70 years, which, let's put it this way, that means that what we've been saying, what Dan Bongino's been saying, what a lot of us have been saying, is that he actually is worse than Jimmy Carter. Anyway, apparently even Democrat voters feel stuck and are dreading the 2024 election, according to this poll. So obviously Republicans hate him. I mean, don't hate him, but definitely don't like him. So yeah. But anyway, it was a recent national poll which shows Biden's popularity has dipped below the past 13 American presidents, going as far back as Harry S. Truman. Okay. Supporters, obviously, of the current administration argue that this is due to Biden's arrival to office during the height of COVID-19 and the economic fallout that followed both the pandemic and the Russian Ukraine conflict, which is a bunch of complete malarkey. The reason being is because the man literally is a vegetable. He should go back to the basement and just stayed in the basement and not touched anything, and he would have been probably one of the most successful presidents and definitely on the way to being reelected in 2024. But instead, he had to teeter-totter around, make a whole bunch of mumbling and stumbling promises, and then, of course, try to carry on those promises, knowing that he can't. But anyway, his age is apparently a front and center issue for everybody, which, it should be. But also, I would guess that it has to do with his economic issues as well. But there's a lot of controversy with the advanced age, the mental faculties. Let's see what else here. The recent Yahoo YouGov survey also revealed an overwhelming 60% or 67% of voters, 48% which are Democrats, think that he's too old for another term. And what's even worse, actually, too, is Vice President Kamala Harris. Only 35% actually believe that she's qualified to step into Biden's shoes. I can't believe it's even that high, to be honest with you. But anyway, so by comparison, according to the poll, by comparison, only 42% expressed the same age concerns over Trump, despite them being only 3 years apart in age. And the reason being, of course, is if you look at the difference between Trump and Biden when they speak, you can just bet on that. All right. Well, apparently, the Biden White House has tried a new form of boost for Biden. Now, there were some originally that accused a lot of people of the fact that he was that he was using like vitamin B12 and all of these things. They were injecting him with stuff before he would go and speak, so on and so forth. Well, apparently after the weekend, after the holiday, a new substance was found at the White House. It was considered a hazmat situation, which eventually rolled itself into the fact that cocaine was found at the White House. Now, here's the thing, okay? I mean, obviously, the easy joke is to jump in and say, oh, it was immediately, this is obviously Hunter Biden, so on and so forth. So let me just kind of clarify a couple of things that I found out. Now, first of all, this story is very new, so we've got to apply the Dan Bongino 72-hour rule. But I can tell you two things. One is that it was found in the West Wing. Now, for those of you that don't know, the West Wing is not the residence. It is the business area of the White House. It is where all the conference rooms are, the situation rooms, the press briefing room, the kitchen is there. They have a dining area, so on and so forth. But the thing that is interesting about this entire situation is that Hunter Biden was at the White House over the weekend and was with the Biden family during the Independence Day celebrations. And so there is some suggestion that this substance got into the White House on the back of a family member. And the reason being is because, as Dan Bongino, who was a Secret Service agent, basically says, he goes, there's no way that somebody who was not the family member could not have been searched, because everybody that comes to the White House outside of the family goes through and could potentially have carried it in. I'm not exactly sure how 100% true that is. I mean, policies could have changed since Dan left the Secret Service. But at the same time, though, you have to kind of wonder, the only way to get this into the White House had to have been at least a trusted person. Okay. So yeah. Apparently now there was a early report that it was found in the library. And then of course there's other reports where it was found where, places like where they had checked phones, things like that. But again, I'm not entirely sure where it was, so we got to give it a minute to kind of figure out all of the details. But for sure, cocaine was found at the White House. The Secret Service did clarify that it was cocaine over the weekend. And it was a preliminary field test that found it. And so that's, according to the piece here coming from Just the News, it said the discovery came soon after first son Hunter Biden's visit to the White House on Friday, after which he and his father left for Camp David, according to Newsmax. It still remains unknown as to who the substance belonged to or how it arrived on the premises. So, there's still some question, but again, we know Hunter Biden has struggled with substance abuse, and the press has been trying to keep it a little bit under wraps about it. So I don't know. I'm not necessarily going to accuse. In fact, Mark Levin even made a comment that it could have been the press corps that brought it in. Oh, that would have been funny. But anyway, so this is going to be a developing story. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it's kind of interesting, to say the least. But my guess is that it took them, they still don't know who placed the bombs at the DNC on January 6th. And they still don't know who the bomber is, even though they have, all kinds of information. So I think this is going to be one of those things where they're just going to spin their wheels, act like they're doing something, and it's never going to be found out. The same thing goes with the Supreme Court Dobbs decision leaker. They still have no idea who did that. So, yeah, anyway. I don't know. It just seems kind of coincidental, and it's sort of interesting about it. Yeah, so I don't know. The Biden administration's court cases and stuff have been a real problem and stuff like that. So this is going to be really interesting. And who knows, maybe Joe Biden, heard that Bill Clinton got some blow in the Oval Office and figured out that maybe he could take some of the white powdery substance in there. I'm sorry, that's bad. I cracked myself up on that. Oh my gosh. Anyway, speaking of things rising in from the Oval Office, this also from Just the News. The 4th of July cookouts cost 15% more since Biden took office, which again, that whole Bidenomics thing. Oh my gosh, Bidenomics, so on and so forth. It's lowering cost. It's not lowering cost. It's not lowering cost, folks. It actually has raised cost. Now, granted, this year was lower than last year. All right. But last year we also had inflation rate around 9%. Right now we have an inflation rate around 4%. So here's the information that came. So this is coming from the piece in the Just the News. The information obtained from the American Farm Bureau on specific item price changes in 2021, the White House touted a decrease in the 4th of July cookout price by 16 cents compared to the previous year, which was $35.70 to $35.54. Okay. The White House said in a tweet, "Hot dog, the Biden economic plan is working." Okay. However, this year's cost, so that was last year. So this year's cost, when compared to the costs cited by the White House from the, again, the American Farm Bureau's list in 2021, was $40.90, which was a 15% increase from 2020 before the president took office, according to the analysis done by Just the News. Biggest price change for any item on the 2021 White House cookout staple ground beef, which has increased roughly 30% since 2020 from $4.45 to $5.77 per pound. Though the cost of a July 4th cookout in 2021 was 16 cents less than the year before, the 2023 version will cost roughly $5.20 more than one did in 2020. Bidenomics. Gotta love it. Got to freaking love that Bidenomics. And of course, that's going to be like one of the big things. I know the White House in all of the places that, Joe Biden has accounts that I happen to follow. Every single one of them has always been touting Bidenomics. And so, yeah, this is going to be interesting. It just horrible. All right. The other thing that's kicked off here in the news over the 4th of July, the Independence Day holiday, was a shootout and an attack, an alleged shooting and killing of 5 people in Philadelphia. Now, they call it a mass shooting because it was 5 victims. Okay. But they immediately, of course, and the left wing has immediately, of course, come out with the whole idea, again, of assault weapons and, gun control and all of this other stuff. Well, one of the things that they did not really clearly talk about, and you'll notice this is missing from the mainstream media's talking about this, and it's probably going to go away fairly quickly, actually, because of this. But a new report came out that the person who did it was a BLM supporter as well as a cross-dressing person. Now, this individual was a male who is a biological male, but liked to dress in women's clothing. Okay. The suspect in the Southwest Philadelphia shooting on Monday night has been identified as a 40-year-old Kimbrady Watson Carnicker. And according to the Philadelphia Inquirer, Carnicker was arrested on Monday evening after the alleged shooting and killing of 5 people, injuring 2 children in the Kingessing neighborhood, or Kingsessing neighborhood. Police said they apprehended a male suspect who was wearing a ballistic vest. But apparently some pictures have emerged where on Facebook where this person was seen posting in support of Black Lives Matter and following Black Lives Matter's Philly Facebook page, as well as posting photos like the one you see in the beginning here, posting photos of dressing as a woman. So yeah, we'll probably see this disappear pretty quickly, in terms of conversation. But this individual was apparently somewhat disturbed by some of the things that they were posting and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's a sad, tragic situation whenever this happens. But the point here is that this individual, I mean, anyone who takes the life of other folks without doing it in self-defense is essentially mentally ill and sick. So, yeah. Anyway, absolute horrible. And speaking of violence, I don't know if anybody has been watching because I know the mainstream media is not talking about this. But the French have got some serious problems on their hands. They took in a bunch of refugees from Albania, I believe it is. I'm trying to see here if it's in here. And didn't really talk about it. I think it's a bunch of Albanian refugees. And apparently these refugees, there was an Albanian kid who got pulled over by the police, French police, for speeding or something. And during the traffic stop, the kid tried to take off. Now, the differing accounts. So the police said that the kid tried to run over a police officer. Oh, yes, Algerian. They're Algerian immigrants is what it is. Thank you, Amy, for correcting me. It's Algerian. I couldn't remember. But apparently the police made a traffic stop, tried to get the individual to stop. That individual who had apparently been picked up before or has had run-ins with the police before, apparently tried to take off. The question is whether or not they actually attempted to run over a police officer. One angle shows that it looks like they tried. Another angle shows that they didn't. But in response, the officer pulled his weapon and shot and killed the suspect. Now, at first, the police obviously kind of tried to cover it up, is supposedly what I've heard through the news media. But what ended up happening, though, is that the refugees, the illegals or whatever they are, the Algerians, they all started protesting because of the fact that this young man was killed by the police and because of the questionable circumstances surrounding the shooting. Well, apparently they've been rioting for about 4 or 5 days, and probably even more, I don't know, because even Emmanuel Macron, who is the French president, I think, the French president has put a kibosh on social media and that kind of stuff outlets. So we've only been getting various bits and pieces of information, but apparently they've been rioting for a long time. And right now, according to the Daily Wire, violent riots cost French businesses over $1 billion. There's been photos and pictures and video tape of fires and buildings burning and all kinds of stuff as this goes along. And of course, there's photos and videos of the Algerian subgroup, the protesters. They're running around with Algerian flags and so on and so forth. The officer, from what I understand, the officer has been placed on administrative leave at the moment while the investigation is going on, although it will probably end up to where they will be fired if they haven't been yet. But the last I had heard was that they were on administrative leave, and that they are probably looking to get out. But apparently a French business association called MEDEF came up with the estimate after the country faced widespread looting and arson following the police shooting of a 17-year-old boy during an attempted traffic stop. And the police have apparently arrested thousands in an attempt to quell the violence. Now, the thing about it is at first I didn't hear about what had caused this, but what I had seen is just images of rioters beating up essentially white French people. And one of the men that was supposedly attacked he worked for a nonprofit organization that was attempting to help the Algerians make the move into France. So he was one of their supporters, and they tried to beat him up, probably not knowing who he was. But anyway. So I don't know specifically where this is occurring, but apparently according to the news reports, it's all over France. But one of the observations that's been running around on social media is this very well could happen here. It could happen here very quickly. If you recall back in the summer, I believe it was 2020, or maybe even 2019, where, when you had the whole George Floyd protests and everything else, really, really wouldn't take long for this to occur. And yes, Amy over on Rumble points out that the Muslims in France are not really integrated. So this set them all off. And yeah, that's pretty much what happened. They're not integrated, which is one of the big problems that you have when you have a certain segment of society that comes to a country but doesn't try to assimilate. That's where the American system, where the Americans, we think of ourselves as a melting pot. We try to get our immigrants to assimilate. When you stop doing that, you no longer have an assimilation of a country. And yeah, it becomes a bit of a problem. Definitely becomes a bit of a problem. All right. So let me go ahead and let's get on to the constitutional order for this evening. All right, and tonight's constitutional quarter, I want to talk a little bit about the First Amendment. Now, I know I'm kind of jumping subjects. I wanted to try and do this in a chronological order, per se. But realistically, I'm just saying that the First Amendment, especially here recently, has become a large discussion with regards to a couple of things. And so, especially the latest cases. And so what I really wanted to do tonight is I wanted to kind of focus on the First Amendment, and let's talk a little bit about this. So here is the text of the First Amendment. And of course, I'll be reading from the Constitution of the United States, leather-bound version you can get at constitution.whiskeymusings.online. You can go there and purchase this, which, by the way, the Institute on the Constitution, who offers this product, has got a 20% off until July 8th. So you can go there and get 20% off of this fabulous Constitution book. It's buddy tested, buddy approved. And I don't even think I've seen buddy in there yet, but in tonight, but buddy tested, buddy approved, and so on and so forth. So the First Amendment, let's talk about it. And here's the text. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Now, here's the thing, is that the First Amendment, most people think of it as freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, and so on and so forth. But one of the biggest things that comes out of the First Amendment, which a lot of people incorrectly interpret. Now, I've already kind of talked about this at one point when I was discussing how the American government and the American country was founded in a Judeo-Christian foundational aspect in terms of its values, its principles, so on and so forth. The majority, if not all, every single one of the founding fathers were of a believer in some type of a religion that recognized a creator and also recognized the difference between natural law and man's law. And so whenever somebody tells me that, oh, the America is a secular nation, we're not. We never were. We never were intended to be. Okay. And I've got a little bit of proof tonight about that. But one of the biggest hangups that everybody has is the phrasing in specifics about the religious part, is the phrasing about the Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, pretty much everybody kind of knows what freedom of speech is, and there have been limits placed on freedom of speech. I mean, there's things like libel and slander and some of those others. I mean, you can't just call somebody out and harm their character without having any proof. Okay. You just can't do that. But you could pretty much say anything else as long as you're not trying to, attack an individual. You could pretty much say just about anything else that you want. Now, of course, I've already debunked the whole, yelling fire in a theater. That's actually been thrown out in terms of a standard, even though everybody still uses it. Doesn't exist. But the other part of this that everybody seems to be argumentative about is the whole establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, the biggest challenge that, of course, gets thrown out or gets thrown into the conversation is this whole concept of a wall of separation between church and state, that church and state are supposed to be separate. And this is actually a phrase, and I've already kind of covered this in one of my other episodes, but this is actually comes from a phrase from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a religious organization. The name of it escapes me, and was clarifying the whole concept of religion and government's role within that religion. Now, you need to understand that when the First Amendments were written, the country had just gone through a war with respect to attacking an attacking force that was essentially doing, if you look at the first 10 amendments, was essentially doing just about every single one of them, at least the first 5 for sure, during that war. And so the First Amendment was the fact that the English were trying to make sure that everybody who was in England joined the Church of England and worshiped at the Church of England. It had nothing to do with whether or not religion needs to be a part of government, because if you look at the way the founders believed in the whole concept of natural law and then man's law being subservient to natural law, you would recognize the fact that they understood that religion is a part of government in terms of creating these laws, because you have to have a moralistic and ethical value that comes from the natural law or God's law and permeates into the man's law. And so because of this, the phrase about the establishment of religion and the free exercise thereof, in particular the establishment part, is that the wall of separation that Jefferson was referring to was a one-way wall. It was to prevent the government from forcing religion upon a people, not people using religion as a part of government. And this has been misinterpreted quite a bit all over the country. Now, the reason why Thomas Jefferson is quoted so often is because he's the only one that has actually even talked about it in particular. But one of the things that is a misnomer is this idea that Thomas Jefferson was some sort of a secular person. He was not. He was what was considered a deist, and a deist did not believe in what was referred to as the revealed God, which is the God that you see from the Bible, okay? But rather that God reveals himself, or the creator reveals himself through nature. And so this is where the big difference comes into play. But oftentimes people are like, well, but Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, first of all. And if you read, like we read yesterday, the Declaration of Independence talks about a creator and how all men are created equal under that creator. So he recognized the idea of the natural law and man's law. But the other part that people talk about is that he might have been told to write that, that he was actually secularist. And so therefore, the whole concept of the separation of church and state means that the American government was not supposed to be based off of any particular religion or religious values. Well, okay, you could make that argument, but it does seem very weird that every single one of the founders believed in a form of God, believed in a form of natural law superseding man's law, recognizing a creator. And so it just naturally, you can make the natural assumption that they knew that religion would, in some cases, drive politics. And so when they made that First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, they basically were saying, government, you don't have the right to establish a religion. And you can't block anyone from the free exercise thereof. Now, I ran across, it just so happens this last, the 24 hours, 48 hours, I ran across a quote or a series of quotes that gives us more of a look into Jefferson's mind, because most of these were written by Jefferson himself. And so the thing, again, the thing about it is that most people consider Jefferson to be like, this guy that didn't necessarily believe in God. Well, these speak otherwise. And for those who are out there who think that Jefferson was not a God-fearing, God-driven man, I defy you to go to the Jefferson Monument, because some of these are the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. So some of these phrases are actually carved into the walls that talk about it. And this first quote here, carved into the northwest wall, this is the quote, and it comes from a series of original passages. But this quote comes in and says, God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are a gift from God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Commerce between master and slave is despotism. Nothing is more certainly written in the book of faith than that these people are to be free. Establish a law for educating the common people. This is the business of the state, and on a general plan. Now, that's a compilation of a bunch of passages. The first part was talking about the God who gave us liberty, or who gave us life, gave us liberty. And he wrote that in a summary view of the rights of British America. Okay. Then where he talks about the liberties of a nation, be secure when we have removed a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift from God. So that came from his notes on the state of Virginia, a query. So he pretty much is saying in that particular case, for, particular right is that in his writings, he's asking the question, if God is taken out, if we remove God in the conviction of God from people's minds, then the liberties of a nation will be that we thought were secure will be removed or can be removed. And so in his mindset, by writing that phrase, in his mindset, in order to have liberty, you have to have a nation that is virtuous and moralistic, like John Adams wrote. So the idea that our country is not based on or founded upon a religious belief or a religious mindset is a complete fallacy. And so the incomplete idea of the First Amendment basically saying that religion needs to stay completely out of government, again, is completely false. The idea of the First Amendment is to prevent government from messing around with people's religion and to prevent the government from establishing a religion. It has nothing to do with whether or not religion exists within politics. This is also further reflected by the fact that many of the congressional meetings, in fact, even to this day, are started with a prayer. That we still have traditions that include prayer within our political institutions. And so the whole idea of removing things like the Ten Commandments from a rotunda, or, not referencing the idea of the natural law or God's law above and influencing man's law is completely false. It is 100% wrong. And when the Supreme Court, which honestly was an activist makeup of a court, when the Supreme Court ruled that government, that all religious artifacts need to get pulled out of government, that was the incorrect take. It was completely incorrect. And right now, what we see in today's world is a specific result of the idea of taking government out of politics. Taking religion out of politics. I'm sorry, folks, but the left, you guys thinking it's secular, all of you atheists and everything else, you're free to worship however you are. Okay? You're free to worship however you are, but the state is not God. And God can live and does exist within politics and the state. That is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor. If you like the program, go ahead and head on over to Rumble, sign up for an account. It's free. And once there, follow the Whiskey Musings Broadcast channel by clicking that wonderful little button. I stream Wednesday nights and Saturday nights, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. And I will be seeing you on Saturday night. You folks have a great remainder of your week, and we'll see you on Saturday right here on the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. Good night, everybody.
The Whiskey Musings Broadcast is produced by Active Eye Media, LLC. All rights reserved.